How's everybody doing?
Good.
Yeah? That's good to hear. Good to hear. So, real quick, I just want to share with you a little bit about our trip this last week. It was awesome. But it was so cool. I think my highlight, I'm just going to brag about this a little bit. My highlight was, how many of you guys know Love Does? It was like the theme for Winter Retreat like 2 years ago. It's a great book. Bob Goff, my bro. I saw him during my week in San Diego, and he ran up and gave me a hug. Because we've been talking the last few months. It was awesome. It was my highlight of my life. But yeah, it was so cool. I learned so much. I think we'll find out what happens. But we're going to kick into a 1-week series. So it's not really a series, but roll with me. But it really spawned out of this week for me, and I want to come back and share with you a little bit of what I was convicted of and what I was learning. So this is more of a venting session than anything else, but track with me. It's going to be great. So let's pray real quick, and then we'll dive in. God, thanks so much for this awesome worship team. God, and the opportunity to worship you. God, I thank you so much. There's thousands and millions of people around the world who are dying every day for this faith. God, because they choose to worship you. God, I thank you that we don't face that here. But God, help us not to lose that wonder and awe of being able to worship you. God, the significance that it is. God, I pray that this message would not be mine. God, that the words would be yours and not mine. And anything that are my words and not yours, God, that they would fade away. But God, I pray that it would spark conversation around how we better be your family and your church. God, how we better love you. So thank you for all you've done. And speak through this time. In your name we pray. Amen. So, how many of you know that there is a time and place for everything? This is an interactive board. Thank you. What? What is that? We're good. Okay. Time and place and everything. First, the sleeping is probably not the time for now. What I mean is that there are some things that are more appropriate for one place and may not be appropriate or another. See this. An example would be the kinds of noises and fumes that your body emits may be okay when you're hanging out with your friends, but not necessarily when you're having dinner at your grandmother's house. You tracking with me? That's an awkward conversation. Or if you want to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, coming up on stage here, grabbing the mic and announcing it with him or her in the room is probably not the best way to handle that, right? Awkward. Not the right place or the right time. Or if you feel the urge to do ballet, math class should not be your stage. Ladies and gentlemen, you know who you are. Okay? Or my buddy's kid, he's about 24. They just had their first kid about 2 years ago. Crazy. But they're potty training him way early. It was crazy. But he tried out the display toilets for Home Depot during his practice. Yeah. And I don't mean he just sat down. I mean, once he started, they couldn't stop him. They just had to let it happen. And he filled up the toilet bowl, if you know what I mean. He filled it up. Filled it, okay? Not really the best place for a trial run, all right? And I confess, I've made my own fair share of mistakes like this in this area. And I don't mean like the Home Depot kind of thing. That's another story, another counseling session. But in terms of timing, okay? My sophomore year of high school, I was sitting next to, I'm not kidding, the prettiest girl in the entire school. Okay? Prettiest girl. Her name was Kylie. And we were in Mrs. Long's AP calculus class. Alright? And I dropped my pencil. Okay? It was a Bic. .7 millimeter? Y'all know what I'm talking about? And it was bright yellow. I remember it because this is how scarring it was. Okay? I dropped it on the ground next to her desk. I wish it was part of a move. No, I just dropped it because I'm a little bit like that. Okay. And when I bent down to pick it up, something slipped out. And it didn't slip. It was the loudest, potentially the loudest fart I've ever had in my entire life. In the middle of class next to this girl, Kylie. You could say that it was a little more than slightly traumatizing. right? And when I went to go to the bathroom after that because I was like, no. But when I came back, the entire class, before I knew it, the entire class, like the class of 2011 knew what I had done. It was awesome and traumatizing, so I'm still going to counseling for that. That's cool. Is anybody connecting with this though? Or is this more of a venting session for me? Anybody with me going like, nope? Good, awesome. All right. I bet you've had some moments like these. Times where you learned the hard way that whatever you did or whatever you said at the wrong time or place, maybe it wasn't the right time, right? It seems that the most memorable examples of this are when times when we got it wrong and made fools of ourselves, right? The awesome times don't necessarily stand out because most people will ask 20 questions going, what's your most embarrassing moment of your life? And you have like 30. You're like, which one? Okay, right? But sometimes it seems that the most awkward and embarrassing situations, we learn the lesson most accurately from them, right? We learned the lesson that there's a time and place for everything through those times that we maybe mess up a little bit, right? And as good as it is to be aware that things have an appropriate time and place, we can sometimes get distracted by that too, right? We sometimes put so much focus on what fits, where and when, that we end up compartmentalizing. I had to work so hard this week to say that word correctly. I'm just saying. So we end up compartmentalizing our lives. I'm going to pronunciate that because if I try and blur it together, it's not going to come out right. We end up with lots of little worlds, is what I'm trying to say, right? And sometimes we get so caught up in drawing these lines in our life to show what fits where, and get so caught up in keeping areas of our life from overlapping, that without even knowing about it, we begin to make our world really small, right? And if you're not sure what I mean, check this out, and then hopefully you'll relate. Think about your friends. Okay? Do you have categories for them? Do you have school friends? Neighborhood friends? Church friends? Work friends? Facebook friends who you're not really friends with, but the label says so? Stop pointing at each other. Okay. Some of us have hundreds of friends scattered across those different categories and many more that I couldn't even begin to venture into. But I have a question. Do any of your friends in those categories, do all of them know each other? Right? If they all came to our houses for a big party, would they be completely strangers and it would be a totally awkward mess? Katie's face right now says everything. She's like, please tell me this is, no. And the idea of them all being in the same room makes us want to throw up a little bit in our mouth, right? It's just not a fun thing because our worlds run the risk of colliding, right? We may not want to see these social lines blurred, and so we keep them separate. We don't want our church friends to know our neighborhood friends because who we are at church may not exactly gel with who we are in the neighborhood or who we are in school, who we are on Facebook, right? But it goes beyond just our social realm. The reality is that we draw those lines in many areas of our life. We begin to believe that there is a time and place to be ourselves, and when we put on a mask with certain people in certain other areas, right? We're no longer ourselves. We reinvent ourselves no matter what platform we're on. We act like one person in one place and choose someone different in another, right? Or we choose when it's appropriate to be nice to people and when it's not appropriate to be. Maybe we're nicer when it benefits us somehow. Beyond that, forget about it. Or maybe we choose to only think about God maybe at church, right? We're just going to dive right into it. Maybe we choose to think about only God at church and only church. We don't see the need to think about it or talk about God in other areas of our lives. And when we're at Ascent, when we're at youth group, when we're at church, we think about it, we talk about it. But as soon as we leave those doors, we leave God there. And He doesn't exactly fit in our other worlds, does He? We may have never really thought about it this way before, but when we work so hard at keeping the lines crisp and clear about what belongs where, we're compartmentalizing. Can't do it. And in working so hard to be what we want to be in our various worlds, I think we start to lose sight of who we really are at our core. We become so inconsistent, and our lives begin to be disjointed. For many of us, it's our Facebook or Instagram lives that we can't have contaminated by this whole religion thing, right? We can't have everybody seeing Jesus Because then what would they think of us? It's like saying what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Oh, that's right. Okay, now we're trying. Okay. But there's a reason that slogan worked so long in the industry that accompanies this so-called Sin City. Right? People related to that. They wanted to feel that whatever they did in Las Vegas would stay there. They could be wild, crazy, unwise, and stupid, and believe that when they got back to their normal lives, their family lives, their professional lives, there wouldn't be any fallout or consequences. Right? Anybody else wish for that reality sometimes? In life, every bit of our life? They were safe there. They wanted and needed to believe that what happened in Vegas would stay there. And if we aren't careful, we begin to adopt the same philosophy in our lives. What happens in work stays at work. What happens at your friend's house stays at your friend's house. What happens at home stays at home. And especially this one, what happens here at Ascent or at church, whatever you want to call it, stays here. Right? Not because anything bad necessarily happens at any of those places, but because we think that everything should remain separate and apart. But there's a danger of being disjointed and fragmented. God wants us to be whole, and He wants us to be a part of a whole being. He wants you to be whole. One person in all of your little worlds. Right? He wants us to be there. He doesn't want us to be checked at the door. He created you to involve Him in your whole life. Not just a random part here or there. So here's the question. How do we get from Him being a fragment of our lives to Him intersecting into every part of our lives? How do we get from Him being a fragment to intersecting? How can we learn to not compartmentalize? Right? How can we begin to start living like what happens at church doesn't just stay at church, but actually impacts the rest of the world in every part of our world? So here's the deal. Some of you have Bibles, some of you don't. You'll have the Bible out. There's Bibles in the back. Pull open your Bibles tonight. If you don't have one, then it'll be on the screens. But I want you to have it in front of you. You have to listen carefully if you don't have one and soak it in. But whether you do or don't have your Bible, I want you to write this down. John chapter 8 and 9. Alright? And it's always a good idea the day after you hear somebody speak, no matter what it's on, to go back and review what it is they said or where they got it from. So in this case, go back tomorrow and review chapters 8 and 9 of the book of John. And sometimes you get new insights on what you heard. Sometimes things start to click. But anyway, let's dive into this in hopes of answering that question of how to take what we hear here, and make it so it doesn't just stay here. I want to look at a couple of stories in the New Testament that involves encounters with Jesus, right? Much like what we do here. So let's turn first to John 8, chapter 1 through 11. Sorry, John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. That's a long passage. Okay. Let me set the scene here, though. The story gets interesting right away. It opens with a woman getting caught in the act of adultery. Awkward, right? It's exactly what it sounds like. A Lifetime movie that your mom watches or something on a soap opera, that's exactly what's happening here. And can you imagine standing there and watching this event? Not exactly a comfortable situation for anybody involved. So basically, she was dragged into the streets, still naked, by the Pharisees and religious leaders in the town in front of Jesus. This is what one would call drama, as we all know. They did this to say, here she is, Jesus. Can't wait to see how you deal with this one. What are you going to do? And these leaders didn't really want to know how He would handle this situation. They didn't think that He was a great mediator or a problem solver. In fact, they wanted Him to do something stupid so people would quit following Him and label Him as a false prophet. Right? This whole event was basically a setup, trying to catch Him in the act. They were trying to catch Jesus between a rock and a hard place, and the law would call for this woman to be stoned. But Jesus had been hanging out with what you might consider notorious sinners and misfits, not stoning or punishing people at all. He was hanging with a different crowd. So in light of all of this, Jesus makes a decision. The religious leaders were probably smug at this point. They had Him exactly where they wanted Him. in trouble, stuck. They wanted to see Jesus squirm. Why? Because Jesus spent a lot of time calling out these religious leaders for being inconsistent with their own lives. They said one thing, but lived very, very different. And as a result, they didn't like Jesus that much. In fact, they wanted him dead. And we all know the rest of the story. Spoilers. Okay. The religious leaders knew the law. They knew the playbook on how to handle these things in these situations. The law required that she would be put to death by throwing stones at her. So with bated breath, they waited to see what Jesus would do. The importance here lies with Jesus' response. And what did he do? Jesus stooped down and wrote something in the sand. Now, I don't know what he wrote, not because I didn't do my homework and look into this or read any further in Scripture, but because the Bible doesn't tell us what he wrote. But whatever it was, apparently it was none of our business, and whatever it was did not satisfy the watching and waiting religious leaders. It wasn't enough. So the Bible says this. They kept demanding an answer, picking it up in chapter 8. They kept demanding an answer. So he, Jesus, stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. And he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. And again, we don't know what he wrote, but this time people paid attention. And this is really interesting because whatever he wrote this time coupled with what he had said in some sort of effect, because the religious leaders left, abandoned their stones, and one by one they slinked away and told Jesus told this woman, go and sin no more. Right? And I have a couple questions. Was this story about showing grace to someone who was a sinner? Yeah. Was this story about this woman being rescued? Yeah. Right? Was this story about realizing that we're all sinners and none of us can stand in judgment of somebody else without being confronted of our own sin? Unfortunately, yes. Right? But for this woman, this was about more than just one moment. And here's what I want you to notice today. Check this out. I want you to notice that Jesus tells this woman, apart from just imparting unspeakable grace that she didn't deserve, he tells her to go and sin no more. That phrase, no more. See, this was about her entire life. When Jesus says, go and sin no more, he was saying that this is about more than just feeling safe. This is more about feeling rescued and feeling forgiven for just today. This was about what happens tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And this was talking about what Jesus had done for her in living her life in light of the message she heard and was given. This was about so much more because the next day this woman had a choice to live differently. She had a choice to respond differently to men. She had a challenge to take what happened yesterday when Jesus spoke words of forgiveness and mercy and let it affect how she went through every part of her day from there on out. How she processed every emotion, every desire, everything else. It was about that point on. Right? What happened in that courtyard wasn't supposed to stay in that courtyard either. What happened in that moment wasn't supposed to stay in that moment. And what happened to this woman isn't much different than what happens here at Ascent or at camp or at a retreat. Right? She encountered Jesus and her life was changed. We all remember that. If we have a relationship with Jesus, we can point to that moment. Right? And just like at some point Jesus moved on to a different town and this woman was left with what happens next. And we are in the same position. Camp ends. The retreat is over. Youth group takes a few weeks off. And you have to ask yourself, what now? What happens now when I go back to normal life? It's easy to feel safe, rescued, and forgiven at church, but what happens now when I go home or to school or to work? Do I go back to my home or school or work self? Or do we work at bringing what happened to us here at camp or at retreat or at Ascent back to the worlds that we live in every day? This woman's encounter with Jesus, I think she has a battle that each of us go through every day too, right? She messed up, and oftentimes, who's the greatest critics of our mess-ups? We are. We're the worst critics of us when we mess up. When we mess up, we will sit there and curse at ourselves under the breath, call ourselves names, and determine where our worth is now. We tear ourselves down. But you know what? You know what Jesus whispers to you? You know what Jesus calls you when you mess up at your worst? Beloved. He calls you his beloved. And the battle is choosing to listen to that or to continue on where we've been going before. In that same cycle. And are we going to learn to forgive ourselves, move on, and grow, or remain in where we've been before? In another account written in John 9, so the next chapter over, flip there with me now. Jesus was walking along, he saw a blind man who was blind since birth. Alright? And his disciples asked him a question. Check this out. His disciples say this, Rabbi, why was this man born blind? Rabbi meaning teacher. Why was this man born blind? Or was it because of his own sins or the sins of his parents? Right? Whose fault is it? That's what they're asking. Jesus responded, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. And Jesus healed him. The man who had never seen anything, his own face, his own parents, the world he had functioned in, suddenly he was able to see all of it, all at once. And so, was this just a personal moment between him and Jesus? Was this a gift that was intentioned solely for him? The answer is no. Jesus said that this amazing thing was done in this man's life so that others could see the power of God in him. Right? What happens on the side of the road wasn't meant to stay there. What happens in this man's life was not supposed to remain in this man's life. And after that moment, this formerly blind man could have blended in with the rest of the world. He was functioning now. He could have gone on with his life and told people simply that he got better. Right? He could have met some new friends and kept the story in the past, not letting anybody know what he had gone through or what he had done in the past, whether it was begging or whatever in his life, making it so that no one ever had to know that he was once blind. But instead, when asked what happens, here's what he said. Check it out. The man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam, probably, and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. People questioned him. They questioned his parents. They weren't just curious, they were skeptical. They grilled him. They wanted details. They wanted specifics. And the thing is, it probably would have been easier if the man had just kept quiet about Jesus, right? It would have definitely kept people off his back. But sometimes I wonder if God used mud to heal people because he really doesn't care what we look like. Rather what happens in our life, but hey, maybe you can relate to this. Sometimes working at bringing what you hear here at church, or camp, or retreat into your world seems to be more difficult than you ever thought possible, right? Sometimes you feel like your efforts fail again and again. I'm getting way too excited. And things are just plain hard, right? Harder than you think they should be. Maybe the next day isn't so great. Maybe the next week isn't great. Maybe the next month you have completely forgotten everything that you've stopped trying. Right? You've just stopped trying to do anything to make it a part of your life. And before too long, the great feeling you had when Jesus did something in your life seems so distant. And what we call a spiritual high is gone. We're back to normal, right? And this easily could have been the case for the blind man Jesus healed, but it didn't stop him. This man kept telling people what Jesus did. He didn't understand how Jesus did it. He didn't know why Jesus chose to do a miracle through him and use his story, but this man knew what happened to him. And he wanted to let people know what Jesus was able to do. So he took his experience with Jesus and spread it among all of his people groups. There wasn't a part in his life that remained untouched by this. He wanted everyone to know. And so I asked this question. do we really desire God if we keep Him only at church? Is that a real relationship? So for many of us, this place, Church Ascent, is different from any other place that we've ever been, right? People greet you as you come in. They invite you to play games. People talk to one another. Then the music starts. You hear people singing about God, and you might feel close to Him. You hear somebody speak, and that person might be saying great and amazing things that make sense sometimes when you can get the words right. And these things sound like something you want to do. They sound good. You want to get close to God. You want to make a difference in the world. You want to feel a sense of purpose and direction. Maybe you even pray. Cry out to God. Your friends join you. And there's this great moment of closeness to God and to others. Then you leave church or the retreat or whatever it is, you get in the car and head home. And sometimes all it takes is a few minutes before you start noticing that things are different. Things at home are tense or too silent. Your dad is grumpy all the time. Your mom is out. Your mom is on you about helping out around the house or your grades. And then the next day your friends start acting weird. Something happens at your dad's job. Somebody gets sick. There's drama in your life, right? It's nobody's fault, but it just happens. You begin to look back on this time together and you think, why can't I just stay there? I can't wait until the next time Wednesday rolls around or the next time retreat happens or whatever it is so that I can get away from all of this. While I want you to want to come here, we do. I also want you to know that what happens here was never meant to be experienced only inside of these walls. It wasn't. What happens at church was never meant to stay in the church. It's supposed to spill out into every area of our lives. This isn't just about you and God. This isn't just a place to escape and feel close to God, a place for Him to make you feel better about what's going on in your life. And then you leave and life goes right back to how it was before. And if that's all that ever happens, then this place missed the target. We should pack up shop and probably leave. That's just the reality. It's great to feel close to God while you're here, but it can't stay here. We need to be walking into situations in our lives with the peace and love of God that we've experienced here. We take it out. It's about honoring God in all of our relationships, the easy ones and the difficult ones. It's about living these truths in every place at every time, not just when it's easy. What happens here was never supposed to stay here. What happens here at church can happen at your home. What happens here can happen on your ride home. What happens here can happen when you wake up tomorrow. What happens here can happen with your parents, with your friends, with your ex-friends. Because the same God who meets us here is the same God who walks through every part of your day with you and is present with you, even if sometimes it doesn't feel that way. He's the same God who walks through the halls of your school, your work, your home. The same God who looks at you and calls you His beloved when you screw up the most. And it's the same God that is outside of this place and is at work in this world in every area, even when we can't see it. And the same God who wants to use you and show the very power of God through your story. I don't know about you, but I'd rather be a servant of God than just a tool that He uses. I'd rather be a servant of God whom He calls His beloved than just a tool that He uses. And when you begin to let what happens at church affect how you live in every place and every time with everyone, then you are starting to understand what really following Jesus looks like. When it's hard and when it's easy, because the relationship with God is work, just like any other relationship. And there's something really tempting, even easy about coming in here, hearing great truths, feeling close to God, and then walking away. It requires very little effort, but it takes work to live out what you hear. And it takes work to make your relationship with God a part of every area of your life. But what happens in here, what you experience in this room, or in a retreat, or on a mission trip, or a camp, or whatever it is never meant for just that one moment. It's meant to be a part of every area of your life. Jesus wants a relationship, not an acquaintance. And something tells me that a lot of us in here do too, because something's missing in our life. And I can tell you one thing, it's scary to take Jesus into places that we don't want to. It's scary to take Jesus into school, into work, whatever it is. But once we start it, it becomes a lot easier because it's no longer by our power that we're doing it. So if you'll join me, let's enter into a relationship that goes beyond these walls. And I'll start. I've done a really good job during my time here, staying in my office and planning things. Not really going there. So this week is when I start leaving these walls with the name of Jesus. Right? We're having lunch at City School. It's going to be awesome. Awkward. We're going to embarrass you. It's going to be great. So here's the reality. Your leaders are great at this. They don't live here like I do. They actually have real jobs. Ask them how they take their faith into their work. Whether or not that's talking about Jesus or just living like Him. But today it changes. I'll go first. But I'd love it if you guys followed. Let's pray and go to small groups. God, thank you for all that you've done. God, I pray that as we leave this place, God, that we would not have a faith that stays here. But God, we would take the love and the grace and the peace that you've given to us, that you've shown us, God, the same phrases that you've given to us. When you look at us and call us your beloved, God, I pray that we would take those into every area of our lives. God, that there are people out there who don't know you, and all they need to be told is that they are your child and you love them. There's a lot of people who think that you hate them. And I pray that we would be the catalyst in which they would hear that you don't. God, I pray for the strength and the humility to welcome you into every area of our lives. God, at school, at work, social media, family life, whatever it is. God, let us be different today. God, it changes now. No more halfway faith. We're all in. And God, I pray that you would help us all to know you more. God, whether it's a first time or 100th time, God, that we would fall in love with you again. And you would radically change us from the inside out. God, thank you. I pray that you would bless the conversations had in small groups. And be with us as we leave this place. In your name we pray. Amen.